Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, special guest Jason Timpf, and we're going from a 30,000-foot view of the Phoenix Suns. What has gone wrong? Can anything go right? We're going to break it all down next.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Phoenix Suns. I'm Benjamin Garcia, a credentialed media member covering the Phoenix Suns. I also like to go by the certified voice of reason for the Phoenix Suns fans. It just seems like it gets a little crazy at times, but thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Friday. Don't forget, Locked On Suns is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So click that follow or subscribe button to do what thousands of Phoenix Suns fans have already done. Become an everyday and get locked on to the Phoenix Suns right here each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by our team's newsletter. Listen, you want free, good media info on the Phoenix Suns, maybe some extra fantasy basketball advice, all things your one-stop shop Phoenix Suns. Go ahead, sign up for that at lockedondaily.com. Put your email address in. It is absolutely free. Daily content on your team, the Phoenix Suns. All right. I don't know how Brendan does that intro every single day. This is why I just give the opinions. I give the opinions. I just dance for him. I don't do the whole driving of the show because sometimes I can become a little scatterbrained. From the Volume Podcast Network, Hoops Tonight host Jason Timpf. Jason, how are you doing? And why are the Los Angeles Lakers always getting everyone?
First of all, Benjamin, it's good to see you. This is actually hilarious because this is my first time being on the Locked On Suns podcast, yet I've separately done content with both you and Brendan in other venues. So I'm happy we're finally making this happen. Dude, the Lakers trade thing, like I saw someone, I'm an anti-conspiracy theorist, but I saw someone say the other day, like the explanations involving the Lakers conspiratorially getting access to Luka Doncic actually make more sense than the real reasons coming out of Dallas. And I can't argue against that right now. I mean, I saw the owner, Patrick Dumont of the Mavs giving that spiel today. And I'm literally like, first of all, I just feel horrible for Mavs fans that this is the guy that's representing them. And then two, I'm like, there's nothing of substance that he just offered. It was like this whole thing. It's like everyone else got better. We didn't get better. I'm like, all year long, I was like, the Mavs have one of the best rosters in the league. Like, Luka's going to put it, like, when Luka comes back, he's going to put this over the top. Like, I just don't understand it, but I'm not complaining because it's been great for the show. It's been great for I think everybody in the content space is benefiting from it because the NBA, I think, needed a little jumble. But unfortunately, Benjamin, the Suns are on the other side of that. How are things going over there? Are people turning on each other?
Awful. No, people are turning on each other. A couple of nights ago, I was public. There's been a couple of times this year where this is one of the, I mean, I hate to toot our own horn, but we're one of the more popular Suns podcasts when it comes to the Phoenix Suns fan base. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I become enemy number one. The other day, I was talking about the Suns having at least a little bit of leverage in a potential Kevin Durant trade, and the mob was out for me, and it was just bad. It was all, but listen, they're turning on each other. I'm the voice of reason. I'm not going to go at them. They're lashing out in anger. But listen, people have heard my opinion on it. They've heard Brendan's opinion on it. We're going to go from a 30,000-foot view of the Phoenix Suns and just go all the way down in 30 minutes here. So in a nutshell, this is a loaded question. What would you say is the number one thing wrong with the Phoenix Suns? Is it leadership? Is it the fact that they just don't fit together? Is it you can't pick one thing because nothing is going right? What say you?
Well, anytime you have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker on the same basketball team and you fail to make the playoffs in a field that allows 10 of the 15 teams, and by the way, that hasn't happened yet, but that's certainly on the table. Anytime something like that happens, you can't synthesize it down to one reason. It's going to be a lot of different things. I will synthesize it down to two reasons for you because I think these two are the ones that kind of scream to me the most every time I watch the Suns. Number one, I've seen this a million times over the years with veteran teams. It is a lot easier to play bad basketball than it is to play really good, tough, winning basketball. It's like a lot easier. Like when you start cutting corners, life becomes a lot easier in the NBA on the basketball court. And so I've seen so many veteran teams over the years, including the Warriors and Lakers just earlier this season, where things started to slip through the cracks and they looked downright bad at times because veteran talent that doesn't actually believe they have a chance to win is not going to exert themselves at that extra level of urgency and give a crap, for lack of a better term. A classic example, like even just from the Stars last night, I see Kevin Durant guarding Dillon Brooks on a post up, and he kind of like guards the first move, the little pump fake on the right shoulder fade, but then Dillon Brooks goes to step through to the basket. It's like if KD actually thinks they can win that game, he's going up and he's blocking Dillon Brooks on the step through. But he's just like, at this point, everyone's kind of out of it. And like with these veteran teams that know that they can't win the title, they tend to have like 2-3 game stretches where they look really sharp, but then they just can't sustain it because it's difficult to sustain that sort of thing when you don't believe in what you're doing. Now, I want to be clear. I actually think Kevin Durant and Devin Booker have been pretty sharp all year in most of those details. It hasn't been perfect. They've been cutting corners a little bit more as of late, but I think it stems mostly from the roster down. If you are going to be a player off of Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, you need to be elite at one of three things. You need to be an elite play finisher, so like a knockdown catch and shoot guy, an elite read and react player, so a guy that's going to thrive in 4-on-3s as a decision maker, or you need to be an elite defensive player in some way, shape, or form. And as you go down through the role player core, there are some really solid play finishers in there. Like I think Grayson Allen is an example of a guy who's a really good play finisher. I think that some of their best sequences with Nick Richards operating in the role, he can be a really good finisher around the rim in those sorts of situations. But there's so many examples of guys where it's like Bol, who's like an okay play finisher, an okay connective player, and a good play, bad play type of guy on the defensive end of the floor, where it's like he's doing a lot more damage than he's doing good in most of these cases. I'm looking at Tyus Jones, who was brought in to be a guy who's supposed to help this team with navigating ball pressure and getting them into their sets. And it's like, well, if that's the one thing you're getting from him, and he's not a good off-ball defender, he's not a strong rebounder, he's a knockdown catch and shoot guy, but like there's just a certain amount of redundancy there. And so there's so many diminishing returns. There are no professional dirty work guys that are actually excellent at it on the roster, except for guys like Ryan Dunn, who have been injured most of the year. It's one of those things where this team just doesn't have enough. And so all year long, there's been a lack of belief that has manifested in inconsistent execution in the details. The second piece of it, and this is where it gets really tricky, I think one of the most important pieces of a offense is the ability to get two to the ball. And this team has two guys who can pretty consistently do that in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. The problem is they just are terrible at like consistently capitalizing on those 4-on-3s because of the type of talent that they have around them. And so I think it'll be more interesting when we get to the 30,000 feet view. But like when I watch the Suns, it kind of reminds me of what I've seen with some of these other veteran teams in the past, where I actually don't think they're as far away as it looks. But when you're struggling the way that you're struggling, you're not going to exert yourself to the extent where you look like you're closer than you are. And I think that's how it manifests with these ugly stretches.
Well, that's one of those things that I'm constantly fighting with other media members or fans, where the roster construction, yeah, it's not perfect, man. They're small, and at times they're a little too redundant. I interviewed Nick Wright. He called them a facsimile of each other, that being Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. And then you have an even worse version of that in Bradley Beal, a mid-range guy. But there's no excuse why this roster is the 11th seed in the NBA. It might not even make the playoffs. There's Tyus Jones. I don't know what happened. Maybe the Suns are just a cancer culture right now, where he is really struggled. Grayson Allen's a fine player, but Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, like this team has dudes. For you, is it just the player personnel just doesn't fit, but to an extreme level, even if the talent is there? Or is it the fact that I'm overvaluing these guys? Is Grayson Allen just not as good as he is? Is Tyus Jones just not as good as he is? Is Royce O'Neal just not as good as I think he is? What do you think that is? Is it that, or is it just these guys don't fit? It's just a horrible misfit of talent.
So one of the things that I firmly believe about the game of basketball is that everyone's value is unique to their individual system. So take Tyus Jones, for example. If I were to pick up Tyus Jones and drop him onto the Orlando Magic right now, he would be so immensely valuable to them as a basketball player. Even taking it further to Bradley Beal. Like Bradley Beal in this construct, where I saw a lot of Suns fans believe that he's at his best when he's attacking closeouts on the skip. And by the way, I agree. I think this is a role that is really starting to become an important part of every modern NBA basketball team, which is like, who's your guy that's catching on the skip and looking to score the basketball? And he is good in that role. But Bradley Beal throughout his entire career has conserved energy in effort and execution because he's needed to save his energy for the offensive end of the floor. This team needs him to be a very good defensive player and a very good rebounder. And he's just never been good at those things, at least not at a consistent level. And so what ends up happening is you have a salary slot in Bradley Beal that's taking up a huge chunk of the payroll, and you're not getting a lot of winning impact out of him relative to a much less expensive player. And then you look at, I mean, I don't know about you, Benjamin. How'd you feel about Tyus Jones before the deal went down?
Before he was signed with the Phoenix Suns?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you go to what his value was potentially at the trade deadline last year with the Wizards, and there was talks of him being asked for 2 first-round picks. I thought I never thought the Suns' issue was point guard. I thought that was an insane thing that people said. It was they didn't have a wing, and they didn't have very good bigs, and they were obviously very small. I liked Tyus Jones to come in here and facilitate this, so I liked him. And I remember him with the Grizzlies where they had a better record with him starting than they did with Ja Morant. I think it was like 23-9. So I was all in on Tyus Jones. I didn't think it made them title contenders, but it certainly got me back into believing this team, I don't know, maybe a couple lucky injuries away, and you do luck yourself to a title. So I was there.
Yeah, at a veteran minimum contract, he's an awesome addition under any circumstances. So I want to be clear about that. But there's a little bit of a complication because in the announcement of the deal, it was like Tyus Jones is looking forward to an opportunity to have the starting point guard spot in Phoenix so that he can get ready for his next deal. And then I immediately was like, okay, I see what's happening here. This is a promise to play agreement that's taking place. You know what I mean? And I mean, even as he's gone to the bench, his minute load has continued to be high. And like, I understand coming out of that Minnesota series, how you might look at it and be like, hey, we can't handle ball pressure. This is an issue. And like, by the way, once again, last night, like Kevin Durant and Devin Booker have a habit of struggling against big physical perimeter defenders that can force them into turnovers. And KD was struggling to take care of the ball again last night. So I get that. But I always look at it as like every team is going to have a weakness. Welcome to the modern NBA. Welcome to the modern CBA, right? So bringing in Tyus Jones would address that specific issue, but he brings you literally nothing else. And so this is where like I want to talk a little bit more about like if you look at this team in a vacuum as your core, Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, and you look in the big picture at some of the assets that you have that will be around for a while. Let's take a guy like Ryan Dunn, for example. So that's your 2-3-4. That's your 2-3-4 for the foreseeable future if you were to continue to pivot with this group and try to continue to compete. So what would you need in that situation? You would need an ass-kicking guard, like a big physical guard, a guard who's like Bradley Beal as an athlete, but that is a professional off-ball offensive player and a professional point of attack defender that can slot Devin Booker better as the second perimeter defender that can essentially do all of the stuff that they're not getting out of the guard position at all whatsoever with this group. Like there's not anybody that can do that job right now on the roster.
Couldn't agree with you more on that aspect. That's something that Brent and I have been fighting about all year long. But moving on, just first segment out of the way, they're blistering through all of it. We got a lot of things to get to. I want to get into KD, Booker, Beal. Let's dive into that big three next. First, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you bet your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Listen, we obviously have some NBA bets that we can sink our teeth into. But what do me and Brendan like to do? We like for you to bet your $5 and win and get your $200 in bonus bets. We go and find something that we think can't lose. Now, listen, you're betting. Sometimes things can bite you in the ass. But in this case, we're looking at Auburn minus 690, 11.5 points favorites against Ole Miss in that SEC tournament. That's where a good place to go ahead and put your money and be able to make that money back and get your $200 in bonus bets. FanDuel, $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. 21 plus in select states. First online real money wager only. Bonus issue as non-withdrawable free bets that expires in 14 days. Restrictions only. See terms at FanDuelSportsbook.FanDuel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or visit FanDuel.com/RG. We're running through a bunch of stuff here, and there's a lot of things to get to, so we're just going to keep on diving into it. We kind of dissect some of the Suns' problems there, kind of do it from – it's hard to do because there's so many things going on. But I want to discuss some of the issues with the big three. It's in sports, what do people care about? In football, it's the quarterback. Baseball, what is it? The star pitcher. In basketball, it's the star players. I want to focus on Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker. But since we were just talking about Beal just a second ago, there's this notion that the guy is just cooked, can't play. I don't subscribe into that. Like, there's this idea that he has fallen off the cliff, Paul George style, because his body is breaking down. What are you seeing with Bradley Beal? Is it as simple as maybe good stats, bad team player on the Washington Wizards, and he's just strictly not a winning basketball player? Or is the guy just breaking down right before your eyes?
I think he's just miscast and redundant in his specific role. I talked about this when the Bradley Beal trade went down, and it's kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier with Tyus Jones, where it's like when you actually look at what they sent out, you can't criticize the deal in a vacuum. The question is, should you have gone after a different type of player? Now, what I look at it like is if you were to pick up KCP, not this version of KCP that can't play in Orlando, but let's imagine
Nuggets KCP.
KCP. Imagine like 2023 KCP. If you were to pick him up and you were to drop him into this Bradley Beal role, Bradley Beal's a better basketball player than KCP. And if they were both free agents tomorrow, Bradley Beal would fetch more money in the open market. The problem is that within this construct, next to Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, KCP is going to be nearly as good as Bradley Beal as a weak side scoring player playing with an advantage. Because guess what? When it comes to advantage basketball, when it comes to attacking closeouts, it turns into more of a level playing field when it's like taking catch and shoot threes and making simple decisions, ripping through as someone chases you off the line. And then KCP is just so much better at every single other thing on the floor that you would look for from that position. And so once again, it's not about your value. It's about your value in your specific system. And so if there was a mistake made, and by the way, this is a mistake that I think Kevin Durant has made a few times in his career where he's targeted other players that are like him, whether it's Kyrie and James Harden or it's Bradley Beal and Devin Booker. These are these perimeter 3-level scorers that are primarily on-ball players. And so in that sort of situation, you're going to get diminishing returns. So the question is, like, if Bradley Beal cannot be traded at all whatsoever, then you're kind of stuck within this particular core unless you trade one of KD and Devin Booker, which would be super unfortunate because the way I look at it, I still think KD and Devin Booker is as good of a foundational two as you'll find in the league. So, like, it's one of those things where if they could somehow find a way to turn Bradley Beal into players that are, once again, valuable within this system, then there's an opportunity to improve the roster. Another way to look at it is there are other teams around the league that have players that are redundant, that lead to diminishing returns on their team that might fit better in this particular construct. And those are the kinds of guys that they need to be hunting with Bradley Beal's salary if they can. And again, and I know it seems impossible, but each year you get closer to the end, the closer he gets to becoming an expiring contract, the closer he gets to becoming an expiring contract, the closer you can get to actually moving him for more value.
Yeah, I'm going to make a case to you later on in the show why I don't think the Suns' future is as in so much turmoil as some people think it is. And it's won't me be being a fanboy, but I'll try to sell you on that in a little bit here. But moving over to Kevin Durant and Devin Booker really quickly, the guys that obviously fit with each other but don't fit with Bradley Beal. I'm not going to discuss their play. Devin Booker has been pretty good. For the first couple of weeks, he was iffy, but, sometimes it's just in your head. But he was back to those basically all-star years for Devin Booker, especially recently. Kevin Durant is awesome. But focusing on Devin Booker, here's another theory to you that is going to get me in a lot of trouble and likely screen recorded and thrown on Twitter, and that's happened to me multiple times before. Devin Booker was a different person in 2021 and in 2020. There was a killer mentality. There was a Kobe-esque mentality. He's not Kobe. Jason Tatum's not Kobe. But we all have players and people that we emulate. And Devin Booker tried to do that. I've noticed when Kevin Durant had showed up, Devin Booker's kind of lost that edge. And that is not Kevin Durant's fault for influencing Devin Booker. Devin Booker's his own man. He shouldn't be having another man influence him to where, to me, it looks like he's changing who he is potentially on the court. But to me, it looks like Devin Booker has taken on some of the worst personality traits of Kevin Durant, where Kevin Durant is an amazing specimen, amazing talent, where he can have those traits and still be awesome. But Devin Booker don't have the traits that Kevin Durant does. I think he's become less of a assassin, killer mentality player. Where do you come on that theory that I am a firm belief of you are who you hang out with? Me and you hang out a ton, Jason. Listen, I might just become the best basketball player in the world, play the guitar, and watch Star Wars all day. You hang out with Kevin Durant, it seems like maybe he's taking on some of those traits. Do you think that's fair to question that if Devin Booker has taken on some of those bad traits?
Here's the thing. When you play the uninspired basketball that he's been playing over the last couple of years, I think everything is fair game as far as criticism goes. I think I disagree simply because I think you could drop any fan who hasn't watched the Lakers into a game in November or December, and you could say some similar stuff about LeBron losing his edge. You could pick up any fan and drop them into a Warriors game a couple of months ago, and they would say that Steph is washed. And I think that when you bring in a real belief in what you're doing, that it has a real chance to get the trophy, you're going to get another level of engagement and competitiveness out of those guys. And so again, like to kind of tee you up for this next phase, like if there was a basic upside to sticking with this group and pivoting, it would be if you can somehow inspire Kevin Durant and Devin Booker into thinking they have a chance to win, then you will get more out of them. You will. These veteran players that are in their 30s, the 82 games suck. You better have them believing they're getting a real opportunity at the Larry O'Brien trophy. And I think both of them are at a phase right now where they're like, this team doesn't have it, so why would I kill myself to try to get this team over the top? And again, you can criticize that. I think it's fair, but you could say the same thing about LeBron and Steph earlier this year. So it's like, it's one of those things where I think most of this comes down to roster limitations manifesting as a lack of belief.
Well, he teed me up. I've got a theory for Jason on how to fix this team, or not even so, more so how to fix this team, but that I believe, and I believe obviously our listeners know this as well, that I think the Suns' future is in not as much turmoil as some other people may think. So let's talk about that next. All right, finally wrapping up the show. Let's close it out here, Jason. I'm going to throw this at you. And then we're going to get into Bud, and we're going to rapid fire some things so we can get you out of here at a good time, because you've already spent 24 minutes too long with me. I can already see it in your eyes. But I don't think the Phoenix Suns' future is as in so much disarray as some people think. Maybe they can move Bradley Beal. I don't think that that's very realistic. So I'm looking at the realistic options. I think there is a way. You move Kevin Durant. You bring in a couple of guys, whether it's like, I'm just going to throw a trade out there, whether it's a Minnesota Timberwolves deal. You bring Jaden McDaniels in here. You get some picks. Julius Randle goes to a third team. You get some picks from that too. Or you move Kevin Durant, I don't know, to the Miami Heat. And it's Ware and who knows, another player, and getting some picks back. Jaime Hawkins, I don't know. Or the Rockets, Jabari Smith, Cam Whitmore, your picks back. I think those are very fair comps for what Kevin Durant might get. Some people might think I'm crazy. You bring that into here. You get underneath the second apron, which is very plausible doing that, getting off Kevin Durant's deal. I think you move Bradley Beal back to being the second fiddle. Devin Booker at the 1 and Bradley Beal at the 2, because Devin Booker showed he can run it to a fairly efficient degree. You have those extra wing guys that are able to come in, whether it's a McDaniels, a Whitmore, a Jabari Smith. You're a little bit younger. And I think Royce O'Neal coming off the bench, Grayson Allen, Nick Richards. I do think that's a team that can be a 6 seed next year. Now, listen, I don't think they're a contender, but I do think that buys you enough time, Jason, to a couple of years from now, maybe even next year. Bradley Beal's only got 1 year left on his deal or 2 years left on his deal. The year after that, Devin Booker's 30 years old, and I have a $50 million deal coming off the books. And I think in 2 to 3 years, this team can go back into being a contender, but I don't think they're just going to go belly up Brooklyn Nets handing over their picks to the Boston Celtics style. Am I crazy? Or is this team made their bed and they're going to lie in it for a few years and we're going to think about what we've done?
So I think I would go, if I was running the Phoenix Suns, I would go into this summer with basically 2 different pathways planned out. And I think it's important for leverage. You talked about having leverage to trade Kevin Durant. You're not going to get that leverage in a vacuum because he doesn't have long enough left on his deal and he's too old. So the only way you're going to drive that leverage is if you have the ability to walk away from the table. The only way you're going to be able to walk away from the table is if you have a plan to proceed with Kevin Durant still on the roster. That's your leverage, right? So and by the way, I think this is what the Suns will do. I think we're going to see a lot of reports immediately after the season about how the Suns are not going to trade Kevin Durant, because that's how you drive that sort of leverage, right? Is by announcing that sort of thing. Now, again, we talked about earlier, this is that whole secret to basketball thing. Basketball is more art than science thing. You get a couple of tweaks here and there. You get a couple of guys that are maybe similar level players to the flawed players you have, but that fit roles better and that they bring more value relative to their salary than the players you have on the roster now. Suddenly, KD and Devin Booker believe in the team. You can turn things around, right? And again, as we mentioned, the closer you get to the end of Bradley Beal's contract, you can potentially move it easier. So from that standpoint, I would be looking for every single hard playing, like, by the way, like Jordan Goodwin was on the Suns last year. You have you guys are familiar with this, but that type of guy, like two-way veteran minimum type of talent that you can find that is professional hard workers that just do every little thing that you could possibly imagine, because Kevin Durant and Devin Booker are somewhat more immune to spacing problems than other teams or other players because of their ability to shoot over the top. I would just have that be one of my plans. We're keeping KD. We're finding every discounted, natural motor, play hard, do all the dirty work kind of player we can find. We're getting rid of every player that brings kind of a natural malaise to the table. We're getting them out of there. We're bringing in every ass kicker we can find. But then silently, we're looking to trade KD. And essentially what you say is, we're not trading KD unless you give us this haul, or you're giving us 3-4 firsts and a couple of good players back. That way you have, because there's no point in trading KD if you get nothing back. Like what's the point? You might as well just be mediocre with KD, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. So that essentially is the way I would frame it. I'd be like, we're keeping KD. Here's our plan. We're going to suck, but we're going to be good, and we're going to establish basketball culture. Because you want to talk about Budenholzer, every coach in the NBA looks bad when the players don't buy in. I mean, everyone's singing JJ Redick's praises. Everyone was ready to say he sucked back in November and December when they weren't playing hard for him. So, again, Budenholzer with a locked-in team that's bought into his scheme is a much better coach than Budenholzer trying to coach a team that's literally imagining April 16th or whatever it is that they can go on vacation. So like everything's about building culture and keeping KD, but then we're silently trying to trade KD, and that's our leverage to try to get more out of him.
You mentioned Budenholzer, and we're running out of time here, and I want to get your thoughts on this. Are you firing another coach? Would you fire another coach? Do you think you like Coach Bud? Because it looks like, and I'm not sure how much you follow the Arizona sports media landscape, but there are reports from concrete guys, not dudes with a check mark and his name might be Evan Sidery. There are real guys out there that are putting out people don't like to work with Budenholzer. He's kind of irritating to work with. People don't get along with him. Even with all those things, are you still keeping Bud?
I would keep Bud. I think I would, like, for the record, I don't think Frank Vogel was responsible for their issues either. I think at the end of the day, there's a certain amount of value you can get out of a head coach that brings a schematic approach to either end of the floor, but only if the players are bought into it. And so if you want to get a real valuation of Budenholzer, it needs to be in the context of a team that is locked in from day one and trying to play serious basketball, which this Phoenix Suns team hasn't been. And then again, like, you run into the problem too, if you fire Budenholzer, like, where are you getting that'd be your third coach that you fire in the last 4 years? Like, at a certain point, you're gonna have a hard time getting any other serious coach to take that job, and you're not a brand like the Los Angeles Lakers are. So it's like, it's one of those things where I would just run it back with Bud, and again, like we talked about earlier, focus every personnel move around building basketball character. And that is the number one priority I'd have this summer, is bringing in every play hard professional role player I can find, even the ones that can't shoot, because KD and Devin Booker have a better chance of winning with those guys by making shots over the top and defending their butts off than they do trying to do it in the current construct.
Would you trade Devin Booker? Now, at this point, I'm just trying to get some rapid fire out of you before last second hot takes of it.
I wouldn't trade Devin or KD unless I got a haul. I would trade Bradley Beal for anything that is multiple mid-level contracts. I would not trade Kevin Durant and Devin Booker unless I got a haul.
But I think it's not possible. Like, trading Beal's not possible. No one wants a $50 million guy unless you attach picks to it. And I mean, so the problem with trading Beal is you're going to have to give up a lot. So those 3 first-round picks the Suns have right now, you have to give up all of those to move off of Beal. And you're likely getting next to nothing in a return because you're just getting off that contract. And when you do that, you have nothing else to better your team. Then you're just moving off Beal to move off of Beal. That's why it seems like the better move is move off of KD, bring Beal back in. Maybe he can re-up his value next year as the 2 guy, and we could figure it out then. But Devin Booker, it seems as if you're on that hill too. We're not trading Book. Let me ask you this. As a basketball fan, if you could pluck KD from the Suns realistically on a team, where would you put him? Like, it obviously has to make sense in a deal, and KD would likely go there.
OKC easily. They don't have a 4-man. He's such a shoe-in natural fit there. He'd be an incredible fit defensively alongside Chet. My number one concern with OKC is their ability to knock down catch and shoot jump shots and their reliable secondary shot creation, which he'd immediately solve both. I think KD with OKC would immediately become like a runaway championship favorite.
I went on Jason McIntyre's podcast and he fired that at me. And that was one of those things that I was like, it makes sense, but I don't think KD would go back to OKC. Is that crazy to think that?
I think he'd be stupid not to.
Well, listen, I don't want to call Kevin Durant names because I listen, Kevin Durant is came after every one of us in the media. I'm shocked you haven't had an interaction. Maybe you will one of these days, but Kevin Durant, he's just a different guy, man. Marches to the beat of his own drum. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just, he is who he is. And sometimes it comes off as criticizing, but I agree with you. If I was picking a place that would make sense for the Suns, getting a haul and picks, like OKC could overpay and still have way too many picks on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of players, I don't know. You're not getting Jalen Williams, or at least I don't think. But I don't know what you can move from them and to be able to build this team. But I agree with you. I think that'd be a great place to go. I just don't know if OKC is going to fork over the money, because if you're going to play Jalen Williams, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Kevin Durant, you're going to be in where the Suns are. But the Suns have a billionaire who I think just prints money every day in his office. and the OKC's OKC. I just not sure if I buy that. But either way, Jason Timpf, Hoops Tonight podcast, part of the Volume Podcast Network, very gracious with his time. I gave him a text about a month ago. I was like, Jason, listen, will you grant a couple of poor souls your time? And then after that, he says, sure, I'll put it in my calendar. We'll find something. And then Brendan doesn't even show up. This guy decides he's got things he's got to. Next time, and you and I are the only two people that understand this, but next time he asks for tickets from you for anything, it's a no. It's an absolute flat no. He's got to learn his lesson, man, because we have every time we've had guests on the show, it's only one of us. He's not showing up because I don't know. Listen, if people are calling Bradley Beal PTO, maybe Brendan is just PTO at this point of his career. He's just mailing it in right now with the Suns. I kid, Brendan. You are obviously the better half of this show, but I had to give him a little bit of a tease there because I know you know both of us, and it would have been nice to have him on here too. But duty calls. For me last week, it was the flu. For him this week, it's something else. Thanks for making Locked On Phoenix Suns your first listen each and every day. Now go ahead and make Locked On NBA your next listen. We are experts covering the NBA Monday through Friday, a new show every Monday through Friday, 30 minutes talking about your Phoenix Suns. So we will talk to you guys on Monday. And Jason, thanks again, man, for being part of the show.
It's good to see you, Benjamin. Looking forward to next time, man.
Locked On Phoenix Suns. Until then, I'll see you guys on Monday.